កម្មវិធីកិច្ចសន្ទនាកម្ពុជានិងពិភពលោក
Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. Tonight, I have the pleasure to have a good friend, a long-time friend from way back, more than a decade ago.
Nearly 20 years, I think.
Nearly 2 decades. Ambassador from now the EU, but formerly we knew each other when you were ambassador to the UK. So anyway, welcome to the show, and perhaps I give you a few minutes to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks very much. My name's George Edgar. I'm Ambassador of the European Union in Cambodia, and I've been here since September 2015. But as Siphana said, I was previously here between 1997 and 2000 as Ambassador of the UK. So for me it's a pleasure, and it's exciting to come back to a country that has changed and is changing so dynamically, and to come back in a different role.
Well, George, I mean, don't you miss the old house?
Actually, I'm very pleased with where I live, which is the delegation, the European Union delegation, which some years ago was the embassy of Czechoslovakia.
Okay, yeah.
And we have a very nice building.
Yes.
And for me, one of the lovely things is that we have a garden, we have trees.
The huge trees in the middle.
That's right. There's a bit of green.
Yes, yes. And you got to live next to where you work.
That's right. It's fantastic. I don't have to brave the traffic of Phnom Penh in the morning.
So, in your new capacity, you came back, what, 2 years ago?
A year and a half.
A year and a half ago, yes. That was not long ago. But that must be quite a big time gap, right, between 2000 to 2015, no?
Yeah.
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah. And in between, where were you?
From here, in 2000, I went to Macedonia.
Okay.
From there to be the British Consul General in St. Petersburg in Russia.
Wow.
Then did some years, I've forgotten how many, in London,
yes.
And was then British Ambassador in Uzbekistan, in Central Asia, before coming here.
Okay. So you're more an Asian person then? Well, if we count that Russia is part of Asia.
Yeah. I think by accident more than anything else. In terms of training,
yes.
Within the Foreign Office, within the UK Foreign Office, I really started as a Russia specialist.
Yes, okay.
So Cambodia was a move into a slightly different world, having spent a lot of time in Russia, or in the Soviet Union, and then the former Soviet Union.
Yes. Well, I mean, is there a big difference between a bilateral ambassador and a ambassador to the EU?
Yeah,
in terms of work.
There's a lot that's common, but the big differences for me are, first of all, coming here as EU ambassador, the size of the cooperation program we have.
Yes.
We have a cooperation program that's worth 410 million euro over the present 7-year period.
Yes.
And that's just the direct work with the Cambodian government.
Yes.
There are a lot of other projects or programs that we fund, working with civil society,
yes.
Or working through regional instruments, for example, cooperation with the ASEAN countries in relation to ASEAN economic integration. So that's one of the really big responsibilities for me, is to be in charge of design and implementation of those programs, and to make sure that the funds that we have are used to the best effect and best value in terms of support for Cambodia's development. Then at the political level, There is a difference in the sense that I and the delegation are representing 28 countries rather than just one country.
Yes.
One of the most important changes in the European Union over the last 20 years has been the Lisbon Treaty, which came into effect in 2009, which for the first time created a real single identity for the European Union in foreign policy terms.
But then, how many bilateral embassy representation that belong to the European Union in Phnom Penh?
There are 6 in Phnom Penh,
Okay.
which is France, Germany, the UK, Bulgaria, Sweden, and the Czech Republic. But there are embassies of European Union member states in Bangkok and Hanoi, quite a number of whom actively engage in the relationship with Cambodia, visit quite often. So it's not just those 6.
So in terms of programming, you look, of course, on the case of Cambodia, but then there's a lot of linkage with regional dimension, like the ASEAN, for example, the ASEAN Economic Community. So you do follow a lot of multilateral, like Asia-Europe Summit, for example, that sort of thing, right?
Yes, I mean our involvement here as a delegation is really only in the specifically Cambodia side of those, because we have a delegation to ASEAN in Jakarta. So those big processes are run either from Jakarta or from Brussels. But yes, we end up needing to speak a lot, for example, to the Cambodian Foreign Ministry about ASEAN issues. And we do, as I said, we provide some support for Cambodia as for the other countries in ASEAN in terms of the processes of integration. The work we do with Cambodia is mainly aimed at trade facilitation, at reducing barriers to trade. It's in an ASEAN context, but it's also important in terms of Cambodia's trade with the EU.
Well, I mean, speaking of trade integration, I know the EU has been a strong supporter of the trade sector-wide approach, trade swap, which I happen to be involved in that. So that's why I take a lot of pleasure to see. So on the trade side, I mean, Cambodia is doing good with the EU.
Yeah, the EU is the biggest destination for Cambodia's exports. That's the majority of that is garments and footwear. Rice has been increasingly important over the last few years. And one which surprised me when I came here, but is nevertheless increasingly important, is bicycles.
But these are not cheap bicycles, though.
They are not. They are good quality mountain bikes primarily.
Yes, mountain bike, yeah. I mean, some the price is more than a motorcycle, It's amazing. Mainly because it's a trend, right? It's more environmental friendly. People in Europe, they like to ride the bike, I guess.
It's very popular. To some extent as you say, as transport. There are a lot of some countries in Europe more than others. Denmark, everybody cycles. London maybe less, but it's growing. But then it's also it's not just to get somewhere. It's also as a sport increasingly.
Okay. Still related to trade. I'm very happy that Cambodia benefit from the Everything But Arms initiative, and that's probably one reason why the export overtake the U.S. market. Is that one of the reasons?
It certainly is, yes, because that provides for Cambodian exports to enter the EU with no quotas and no tariffs.
I think in terms of rural origin, the Everything But Arms initiative allow us to have regional accumulation, right? That's why we are.
It does, yes. It's the rules are quite complicated, and there are different accumulation rules with different countries of origin. But yes, it does allow quite a lot of accumulation.
Another thing that I'm very happy to see is that we start to have our famous compote pepper, geographical indication, right? It finds its way in the European market. Somebody sent me a picture of a small bottle like this, which is sold on the shelf of Carrefour in France for €9. So if you multiply by in terms of kilo, we could fetch 200 some euro per kilo. I should retire being a pepper farmer.
Yeah, it's an interesting development because it's something that's affected by quality and reputation. It's not just a question of quantity. There's the same. You see the same in the rice sector with increasing success for Cambodian fragrant rice.
Yes.
Because it can be sold at a higher price. There are other ways of enhancing that through, for example, organic production, which again adds a premium. So I think that's a really interesting development, an interesting direction for Cambodia to look, particularly in terms of agricultural products, looking at ways of adding value.
Yes.
So as I say, it's not just a question of volume of bulk, but a question of tapping into markets where there is a premium price to be.
Well,
to be earned.
and particularly for GI, which the European Union really thrive in terms of having product with a GI, connotation. I think Cambodia have a good chance also in French. When I go to Cambodia, I always say that the French use for wine the terroir.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. I think Cambodia is also terroir. Because of the mountain. Then you have the sea, and when it comes, the air. I was told that's how things work, right? That's why the pepper from Cambodia is so different than the pepper in Kampong Cham. Although the soil in Kampong Cham is also a red soil, but the taste is not as the same as the Cambodia pepper. Quite interesting. Yeah,
it is, and that's exactly right. And the idea within Europe of the geographical indicator very much started as a domestic one, so that French producers or British or German or whatever could protect the products, those products which are named for their region, and ensure that something that has that name genuinely comes from there.
Give me one GI from UK.
Good examples of varieties of cheese.
Okay.
Although France is maybe more famous internationally for its cheese, the UK has a huge range of very different cheeses from different regions.
Okay.
And those are among the products which are protected by geographical indicators.
I can only think now in Italy of Parma ham, which is quite interesting.
Again on cheese, Parmesan.
Parmesan.
For example, Parmesan has to come from the region, Parmigiano.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. So on trade, we anything coming this way, because now we're talking about everything with but it's more Cambodia to Europe. But I'm pretty sure there is the opposite flow also.
There is the opposite flow, but to be honest, the flow of goods from Cambodia to Europe is much bigger than the flow of goods from Europe to Cambodia as things stand.
What could be the opposite? Because I think when I look at trade, I also look at the service sector as well.
Yeah.
Not necessarily good in itself. I think the European community have tremendous strength in the service sector, in engineering, in architecture. I don't know, so many different things. What do you see the thing that strike out in terms of European high standard here?
In terms of goods coming into the market, there's a range. For example, there are a lot of European cars, European vehicles coming to the country. A lot of food products and drink, from wine to whiskey.
Yes.
And technological products as well. There are certainly service providers, whether you're talking about lawyers, accountants. There, in terms of recent developments, French bank Bread opened its offices here only a couple of weeks ago. So there are a range of different areas where the EU is involved, but I think there's room for a lot more.
Yes.
In terms of investment, one of the interesting things to me is that if you look at ASEAN as a whole, the European Union is by a long way the biggest source of investment. In Cambodia, for the moment, that's not true. We are 2 or 3 down that chain. I think there are real possibilities for the future there.
We take a short break, and we'll come back. I want to discuss a bit more how we can improve the potential FDI inflow.
Okay, good.
Ambassador, I think, ASEAN is one of the major FDI destination for European country. Cambodia, I would say we manage to attract about 5 or 6% of the total European FDI vis-a-vis other ASEAN country. What do you think could be done, to make Cambodia more attractive to European FDI, for example?
Well, I give a number of answers to that.
Yes.
The first I think is just to get the information out that Cambodia isn't necessarily as well known as some of the bigger countries in the region to potential European investors.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work that's been done by the royal government in that area. There's a lot of work also that's been done by the European Chamber of Commerce in Cambodia, Eurochan. And for example, you and I took part only a few days ago in an outreach event to European businesses working in Bangkok to encourage them to come and look at the opportunities here in Cambodia. Secondly, there is more to be done, I think, in terms of simplifying and streamlining some of the processes.
Okay.
I mean, in fact, in order to register a business, the process is very quick and very straightforward in Cambodia. But there are other areas where more automation, for example, would be an advantage. It's one of the things we've been working with the government on over the last few years, in terms of customs processes, in terms of trade repositories online, those sorts of things.
So the trade repository is also the EU is supporting that.
We supported through the World Bank.
Okay.
There was a World Bank trust fund, and the World Bank was working directly with.
It's part of a trade sector-wide approach, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Then there are some issues which are to do with the broader environment for investment. When there have been questionnaires sent out by Eurochan to European businesses who are here, they identify the cost of energy and of logistics as an issue here, and they identify issues of the level of education, level of qualification of the workforce as well as being important ones.
Skills.
That it's not a question of innate ability. The Cambodian employees are excellent, but they tend to need more training than employers in other countries in the region, just because of the nature of the education system, the kind of skills that they leave school with.
But here maybe I interject a bit on the area of skill. A few weeks ago we have I saw on the news a signing ceremony between inside Bavaria, a German, sort of like a technology or cluster company who are doing a JV with a local industrial zone here, and they say that they are providing an ecosystem to enable European or German company to come with a certain minimum quality standard, right?
Yeah.
You aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are many initiatives, both purely Cambodian and with outside assistance, to raise the level of skills, to improve the system for vocational training, for example.
Okay.
I mean, this is not a problem that cannot be overcome. It's a problem that will be overcome in the coming years. I'm quite confident of that. But nevertheless, it's one of those. It's to a certain extent at the moment a disincentive.
Yes. Okay.
And then the other issues that tend to be looked at are ones in terms of the implementation of the law. Being certain that the law is going to be followed.
Okay. So I think it's these are the things that I personally think, it's just a matter of working harder, the dialogue, and I think there are mechanisms that the private sector can, pass on their grievance or their concern to the government side. But from a more substantive side, in terms of, I always think, how can Cambodia capture the value add in this whole global supply chain? Because let's face it, when we open up the country to the ASEAN Economic Community, what we hope is that we could benefit from the regional global supply chain. And I think clearly European companies have that image of quality. Yeah. How can we do to capture a component of that supply chain?
I think it's a mixture of things. One of those, as I said, is making sure the general environment is right and looks right, and that people know about it. That European companies are aware of the opportunities, and aware of the access that Cambodia has, not just to European markets through EBA, but to ASEAN as trade barriers within ASEAN disappear. It means that Cambodia, when you look at Cambodia, you're not just looking at the market in Cambodia or necessarily export to Europe. You're looking at the ASEAN market.
You're right.
So if Cambodia can make itself a sort of hub for manufacturing for ASEAN, that's an important way forward. And I think perhaps also there's a need for targeted measures by government to look at specific industries, specific value chains. Maybe extending ones where there's already something going on in Cambodia, trying to build those upwards and downwards. I think this is also extremely important because some of the advantages that Cambodia has at the moment will change over time.
Yes.
EBA is not forever because it's a provision for least developed countries,
which will, I would say, 5 or 6 more years. More than likely we'll graduate from there, right?
That's right. It depends on it's dependent on the United Nations classification, which relates not just to GDP but to the Human Development Index as well. Yes. And that's only reviewed every few years. Yes. So
but it's just a matter of time. It will come. It will come. And I think we should be mindfully aware that when this graduation come, we will lose all this trade preference that we spoke earlier, right? So how do we ready ourselves to move up the next node, which is more about competitiveness in itself?
Yeah. I think, as I say, a focus on becoming a part of those bigger value chains. A focus in some areas, for example, in agriculture, a focus on ensuring that agricultural products are processed within Cambodia rather than exported as raw products and processed in other countries in the region. Also, I guess maybe this is part of the tripartite discussion between government and labour and manufacturers. A focus on productivity. Because that's an issue. Even in the low-skilled areas like garments, it's not just a question of the cost of labour.
Yes.
And of course, wages in Cambodia are increasing, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing for Cambodia and Cambodian workers. But it does again tend to erode that advantage that Cambodia has, and therefore that needs to be compensated elsewhere. And I think productivity is central.
I think a few years ago I visited a Spanish garment manufacturer, and they start to move a lot into higher end production, and they told me that of course it's less worker because you have to retrain the worker how to use the machinery rather than they actually do the sewing, but the productivity go up also because of the technology. So I think there's a gradual shift now, but the trick, as you said, how do we find a balance between moving up the automation, the IT thing, and at the same time not leaving behind those who are not skilled. But how do we do that? And this probably linked to some subject that is very dear to me, which is human capital development. I like before we talk a lot about human resource, but I always think that resource you tend to exploit, resources tend to be depleted, right?
Yes.
Or exhausted. And somewhere somebody mentioned that maybe we should change the word human resource to human capital. That's how you capitalize. That's how you, what do you think of in the area of human resource development? or human capital
Well,
development.
I think you're absolutely right, and Cambodia is in. It's another area in which Cambodia has a very strong position because of the dynamics of the population. That there is a very young population.
Yes.
That in itself is a source of human
Yes,
capital.
yes.
It's a question of taking advantage of that by ensuring that people have the opportunities to get the training they need.
Yeah.
Some of that is ensuring the quality of basic education, and we've been working for some years very
Yes.
closely with the Ministry of Education
Okay.
to support improved education at primary and lower secondary level.
Yes.
It's an area where there've been huge changes over the last 15 years in terms of access, in terms of the availability of qualified teachers, but there's still a lot to do.
So the EU has been accompanying the reform process of the Ministry of Education for a while?
Yes, for getting on for 20 years.
Okay.
And we've been doing that for 14 years, I think, through budget support. That is through not through running projects,
Yes.
which kind of run in parallel to what
Yes.
the ministry does, but to putting funding straight into the Ministry of Finance and
Yes,
Economy to support the work of the Ministry of Education.
Any flagship education program you can highlight it?
It's difficult to do that because of the way we work. We're
Okay.
simply putting money into the budget,
Okay.
and then working with the ministry to support its design of its own programs. As I said, what we've been focusing on is primary and lower secondary education,
Okay.
with a range of indicators for success in those
Okay,
areas.
yeah.
Some of those relate to enrolment and dropout rates, wanting to ensure that
Yes.
that the biggest proportion possible of children of school age are in school and learning.
Yes.
We see it as important to support the process of getting education out to the populations who are harder to reach, which tends to mean the more remote rural villages, populations whose first language isn't Khmer and who therefore have greater difficulty
Yes.
fitting into the education system, making sure that there is equity between boys and girls.
Yes.
Those sort of issues are very important to us.
Part of the Millennium Development Goal. Now we're moving to the Sustainable Development
Yeah.
Goal along that target indicator.
That's right. The work we have done with the ministry has been has been very much built around the government's own strategy in the education sector, which in turn draws on both the overall rectangular strategy of the government and
Yeah.
the Millennium Development Goals.
Okay.
For the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the big taglines is "Leave no one behind," and that reinforces that the wish to get to the people who still aren't within the reach of the system.
Okay, I mean it's a good start to build the base, right? But as you know, Cambodia, we're moving up the sort of like the value chain. Also, if I can talk about the graduation process, at some point to succeed in our effort to industrialize the country, moving up the ladder, we have to have a quality sort of like human resource more into science, in technology, in engineering, in math. When we come back from the break, perhaps you can talk a bit about, I heard a lot about good scholarship of Cambodian going to study in Europe and how these things will eventually change the dynamics in terms of a good quality of work environment, Yeah, all right?
Sure.
Okay.
Very good.
Ambassador, so let's talk a bit about the tertiary education, right? Which I think now Cambodian middle class, Cambodian young scholar, they look up a lot to Europe as a education destination, closer. Before we always think we have to go to America or Canada, but I think now as more travel enable this access, I see more and more Cambodian that I talk to that they apply to UK, apply to a lot from France, for sure. We have a big diaspora of Cambodian young scholar to study there. What's your take on that?
I think it's good. I think it's excellent that young people will travel and get experience and education from other countries. I know that quite a lot go to Europe. There are a number of scholarship schemes, for example, that support that. The EU has a scheme known as Erasmus Plus.
Yes. Tell me about this Erasmus Plus. Yeah.
It's actually, we're celebrating this year the 30th anniversary of the Erasmus program from which this grew, and it's a combination of scholarships for people to go and study both at undergraduate and graduate level, but also and perhaps more importantly for the program as a whole, it helps to establish links between academic institutions for research programs, for exchange of teaching staff, for that sort of thing. There are also a number of scholarship schemes run by individual European Union countries.
I think, just to give an idea, a few years ago, we have Cambodian investor from the diaspora, from France, and we have difficulty to find Cambodian young lawyer who can speak French, because ultimately it's about legal system, right? If you study in certain common law system and you don't speak the language, it's hard to link. And the last 4 or 5 years, I see many Cambodian returning from Lyon, from Paris, fluent in French, fluent in English, but now they can deal with the Cambodian or the French coming to invest in Cambodia. This is quite interesting because I would say maybe during your term as a UK ambassador, France, the French language almost disappeared because a lot of Cambodians who are educated in the French system before the war was killed. And then you have a big gap, linguistic gap there. But I see now coming back, and all because of the effort from Francophonie, for the French embassy to give this scholarship. But to me, language doesn't matter. The main thing is exposure to a way of doing business, the way of thinking, and perhaps linking to what we discussed earlier is to provide a human ecosystem for European company to come when they know that, hey, I can put an ad on a newspaper. I can find 5 people that can work with me who understand how and where I'm coming from. And it's great.
It's true. And I certainly noticed what you said about language, that when I worked here before, I had the feeling that that French was hardly used at all.
Yes.
There were senior people from an older pre-war generation who spoke French, but it didn't seem very widespread among younger people. Whereas now, actually, it's more noticeable.
Yes.
There seem to be a wider range of people who speak French. Another thing I've noticed, and it's true in almost every sector. I think it's certainly true in business. It's true in legal companies, other companies. Is that there are far more senior jobs in these companies that work with foreign investors and so on. There are far more senior jobs now which are being done by Cambodians. Compared to 20 years ago, when there was a feeling that there were a lot of foreign companies where the senior staff were essentially European, US, or whatever. It seems to me that's changing, which is a very positive thing.
Well, you look at the accounting firm, right? Pricewaterhouse, Deloitte, KPMG. A lot of the senior auditors are Cambodian.
Yeah, that's true, and it's an indication that there are generations coming up who have those qualifications, who can do those jobs just as well as the international specialists.
Master, I think we almost running out of time, but I don't want to miss this Cambodia EU formal relationship. I know every 2 years we alternate the meeting, right? Of the Joint Commission.
That's right. So
it's every 2 years, right?
It's every 2 years. Yes. May last year it was in Phnom Penh.
What do you cover?
Spring, summer,
what do you cover
Brussels.
in Joint Commission? Who's coming?
It's there are three subcommittees.
Yes.
There's one on cooperation.
Okay.
So we cover the cooperation program
Right.
there. There's one on trade and investment.
Okay.
And there is one on a whole range of things, which I guess you would put under the general heading of governance.
Okay. And then, so we alternate.
And we alternate.
In Phnom Penh and Brussels, right?
Yeah.
And what do you
it's a-
cover? What you it is the member state all come or just covered by the commission here?
It's actually in one of those peculiarities of the EU. It's the member states participate when we're talking about issues where there is shared competence between
Okay.
the Commission and member states.
Yes.
On other areas, that they don't.
Yes.
So on trade, for example, the Commission leads.
Yes.
On some of the governance or
Yes,
foreign
yes.
policy areas, there is a
Member state.
there is a shared responsibility.
Okay,
so
okay.
there's more member states participation.
I see similarly in when we go to attend the Asia Europe foreign minister meeting or SOM or summit, it's quite interesting. I think the bulk work is done by the commission. Member state, many times they just defer to the commission. So I think it's more work for the commission, but less work for the bilateral country.
That's right, but
Is that by charter? Is that by the Lisbon Treaty? All that
it's something
constitutional thing?
it's developed over the years. But
Yes.
there are areas where the Commission has sole competence.
Yes.
A good example is negotiating trade agreements with third countries.
Okay.
Where it's the Commission that does those negotiations.
Yes.
The member states are not allowed to do separate negotiations. However, the Commission's position is always going to ultimately reflect the positions of the member states,
Yes.
because the Commission is working on behalf of
Yes.
the EU as a whole.
Yes.
So it's not just going off in a direction
Yes,
it chooses to define for itself.
Yes,
it's pursuing a mandate which has
Yeah.
been agreed with the member states.
So in terms of mandate, the commission have the trade mandate. Does the EU have any ambition to do the free trade with ASEAN?
There has been discussion of this in the past,
Yes.
and as I'm sure you know,
Yes.
which is rather. It's rather slowed down over the last years,
Okay,
I think, because of a focus on some of the bilateral agreements
Okay, okay.
with individual members of ASEAN.
With Vietnam,
But-
right?
Vietnam, for example.
Yeah.
But the EU certainly, if there's an interest on the ASEAN side, is very willing to look at a block-to-block free trade agreement.
Yeah, because I think from the Asia-Europe dialogue perspective, there are a lot of discussion on how do we strengthen this European, the EU, Europe, and Asia partnership. How do we deepen this partnership? But ASEAN is a sub block of Asia, but still, as a 600 some million population, we do have a certain economic clout there, and I would say here in the case of Cambodia, we're too small to go on our own. So Cambodia believe a lot into the multilateral system, whether the WTO as a global thing or the ASEAN as ASEAN Economic Community. We like to tag along because you tag a big ship, you less effort, but you have the multilateral sort of like negotiating position there. So I hope that the EU and ASEAN would someday work on that, because it will benefit us.
Yes, and I would say ASEAN is more than just a subset of Asia.
Yes.
Because ASEAN, along with the EU, has perhaps the most ambitious and the most far-reaching integration program of any region in the world.
Yes.
It may not necessarily go in exactly the same way, the direction as the EU, but it's another program that has the same kind of vision, the same level of ambition, I think.
Masa, I'm going to ask you something. We're running out of time. We have a few minutes left, but I can't help but to ask you a very sensitive question, which is how do you see Europe now with all this election? Will it affect the reversal? Because we always believe, Cambodia particularly, we believe in globalization. Do you see worrisome trend that this globalization being challenged?
There is definitely a worrying trend of populism and populist nationalism.
Yes.
And at the basis, the EU is not just an example of globalization, because integration in the EU goes further than that. For me, one of the most important things, one of the most positive things about the EU, is that it's based on a sharing of sovereignty and a move away from the idea that ultimately relations between nations have to be competitive.
Yeah.
The idea from the very beginning of the EU is that if we work together, if we have shared interests and shared efforts, then ultimately it's better for all of us, both in economic terms and in the terms that were foreseen by the founders of the EU, who saw it as much as anything as a means of guaranteeing a future without the sort of conflict that had devastated Europe earlier in the 20th century. And I think it's very important to keep those ideas and those ideals in mind, because otherwise, if people are focused on the day-to-day annoyances of cooperation, or a feeling that there are these people in Brussels telling us what we can do and what we can't do, and we don't like this, it's possible to lose sight of what ultimately it's all about.
Yes.
I hope that we will see over the coming months a new focus on that fundamental vision.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging. I think the results we've had from the election in the Netherlands. There were fears that it would be a lot worse in terms of the rise of populism.
Yes.
So I'm encouraged to see what looks like a good outcome there. We've other big elections coming in European countries over this year. We'll see.
I mean, this year is a year election, whether here or in America finished already, but Europe. But I am quite reassured by your view, and I think the world the last 2-3 decades has prospered because of globalization. We just need to be mindful of this populism trend. But at the end of the day, I think Asia is still a fervent believer, of opening up, and Cambodia is a good example of a country that have prospered and thrived from this economic liberalization. So we maintain that stance. But my friend, thank you so much for this 45-minute very personal exchange, and I'm not going to wrap up because there's nothing else to wrap up or summarize. But I just enjoyed our dialogue.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes. So, any last word you want to say to the audience?
I only want to say that, first of all, it's a great privilege being back in Cambodia and to be here representing the EU. That we're celebrating this year the 20th anniversary of the EU-Cambodia Cooperation Agreement, and I'm looking forward to the next 20 years.
All right. Well, let's go for the next 20 years. Yeah. Good. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the program, and I just want to say that there's a lot of things happening between Cambodia and the European Union and its member state, of course, and I hope that the audience could appreciate the various positive contribution that the European Union and its member state have contribute to the development of Cambodia, whether in many different fields, but for me it's a lot to do about the human capital development that we have benefit over the last 2 decades or so. So on that note, good night.